Okay, so let's make a start, everyone. Welcome again and good morning to all. Welcome to the Meshed RTOManager AVETMISS CRICOS webinar for 2024. In today's session, we'll cover the AVETMISS data reporting for the collection year 2023, which is now going to be due next month on 29th of Feb. Since it's a leap year, you've got an additional day for yourself to finish your data reporting. In this session, we'll cover the AVETMISS data reporting. If you would like to visit our last year's session that we did for 2022's data reporting, the link for the YouTube video is available on this slide here. We'll be sharing the presentation slides as well as today's recording after the webinar, so you can access previous year's recording as well if you would wish to. So in today's meeting, we'll look on the following points. We'll talk about AVETMISS national data reporting, which is fee-for-service data reporting that goes to NCVER. On the first point, we'll cover the data collection processes and timeframes. So we'll look at what NCVER guidelines are about the data collection for AVETMISS and what are the ideal timeframes for the providers to submit their data. Then we'll look at extracting the NAT files report from the Meshed RTOManager CRICOS platform. So I'll take you through the Mesh platform itself, and we'll see where in the platform the NAT files can be extracted and what are the parameters you must use to extract the NAT files. Number 3 is what is required to be reported and where the data comes from. So we'll see what actually the NAT files are. What are the elements that are there in each NAT file, and where is this data sitting in the Meshed RTOManager platform? So that will be about data mapping. So each NAT file has certain elements. So we will talk about where these elements come from in the mesh system. We'll then talk about the submission tools and login details. So I'll take you through the NCVER portal. So we'll look what the NCVER submission portal looks like and how you will be able to submit your data, and talk about the login and the registration on the NCVER portal as well. Then it is a process of submitting the data. So how do we extract the files? How do we upload the files on the NCVER portal? And what does the validation summary or the status report looks like when we receive it from the NCVER engine? And finally, we'll also talk about some of the common errors or warnings that a lot of providers receive and what are the possible resolutions in terms of fixing the data in the system itself. So let's make a start with data collection processes and timeframes. So as I just mentioned earlier, the data reporting for a collection year is usually due in Feb, which is 28th of Feb, but this time it's 29th of Feb 2024, which means that to submit your data for collection year 2023, that is your data from 1st of January 2023 till 31st of December 2023, RTOs have till 29th of Feb 2024 to complete their submissions. Usually, RTOs have an option to submit quarterly or monthly or annual data to NCVER. So you can also choose your frequency of data reporting. But this time, as we are nearing the year end, it's about the year end or annual reporting. So it will entail the whole data for the last year, starting from 1st of January going till 31st of December. It is RTO's responsibilities to ensure that they submit accurate and complete data to NCVER under the Standards for Registered Training Organizations 2015. So you must ensure that the data that you're submitting to NCVER for this national data collection is accurate and complete. So make sure that in the mesh system, you've recorded the data correctly. You can also find more details available on the NCVER portal using this link here, and also on our YouTube channel using this link below. So let's look at how to extract the NAT files from the Meshed RTOManager platform. So NAT files are the files that we submit to NCVER, and where do these files come from? So once you log in into our system as an admin or an S-admin user, you will see this additional tab which is highlighted here on the dashboard. So this tile or this tab will actually take you to a new page where you will be able to extract your NAT files. So once you click onto this tab, you will see the new interface appear, something like the one I have highlighted here. Because we are doing year-end reporting for NCVER or national purpose, the AVETMISS type to export will be AVETMISS for national. So there are certain parameters that you would need to select in order to get the correct NAT files. So your AVETMISS type to export will be AVETMISS for national. The report type will be final report or yearly report, so that it takes everything from 1st of January 2023 till 31st of December 2023. The collection year will be 2023, as we are just talking about. Make sure that when you are extracting the data, you are not clicking on AVETMISS claim funded only, because this AVETMISS claim funded only means the data that is claim funded. And this data goes to the state departments and not to the national authority. So make sure to untick this checkbox. However, you need to tick non-claim only. So non-claim only is the fee for service data that goes to NCVR. So tick this checkbox, and once you have done so, you can click on export to text NAT files as I have highlighted just here. So NCVR engine takes the file in the text format. However, you can also export the files in Excel format for your own understanding, because that's more user-friendly to read. And once you click on export to text NAT files, the system will generate a zip folder which will contain 10 NAT files in it. So make sure once you get the zip folder in your downloads that it contains all the 10 files. Okay. Now we'll talk about the 10 files to see what the 10 files actually are. So the zip folder will contain 10 files as per AVETMISS 8.0, which is the current version of AVETMISS data reporting. So let's look at file by file and what element it contains and how do those elements look in the mesh system. The first file will be the NAT10 file. Please note that the files will be in the sequence of the order that I'm presenting here. So files will exactly appear in this sequence in your zip folder. So NAT10 file, which is the first file, is the training organization file. So this file talks about the training organization or the RTO itself. It will contain details like the organization identifier and the organization name. As we know, this data comes from the admin configuration and setup page in our system, where you set up the RTO code and college name for your RTO. So if there is any issue in NAT10 or if you need to update or change anything, you will need to go into configuration and setup page in the system and fix the details for your training organization. Next file is the NAT20 file, which is the training organization delivery location file. As the name suggests, this file will talk about the delivery location for your RTO. So this delivery location is ideally any training venue where you have delivered the training in the collection year. So this data comes from manage venue or training location setup in our system, which is again located under admin and configuration. This file will contain details about the training organization, the location, postcode, state identifiers, and other address-related fields for the training organization. So any updates or changes here would mean that you would need to go to the Manage Venue page in our system and make the update. Third file is the NAT30 file, which is the course or the program file. This file contains the details about the courses or the programs that you have offered in the collection year. In this file, it is important that the program identifier, program name, and the nominal hours for the program match the TGA listing. TGA listing is training.gov.au's platform where the department has listed the eligible courses and subjects. We need to ensure that whatever data we are providing in NAT30 is in line with TGA. This data in our system sits under Manage Course. So any changes that you need to make for your course or program you will need to go under the course tab in the system and make those changes. NAT60 file, which is the fourth file, is the module or unit of competency file. This file talks about any units or any modules that you have offered in the collection year. Again, this file will have details about the units itself, for example, the subject identifier, subject name, subject field of education, wet flag, and nominal hours. All these details, again, will need to be in line with the TGA website. If there are any discrepancies, you may receive errors or warnings in your NAT files. So make sure your NAT30 and NAT60 have data as per the training.gov.au's listing. Next file in line is the NAT80 file, which is the client or the student file. This file contains details about the students who have studied in the collection year. As you can see, this file contains a lot of elements, and all of those elements actually are about the students' demographics. So the student data in our system comes from the student profile page. You have details about the student name, student USI, student's name for encryption, other details like the address details, the state identifier, disability flag, and other demographics for the student. So if any information here needs to be updated or changed for NAT 80, you will need to go to the student profile page in the system and make those changes. NAT 85 file is the client postal details file, which is about the student postal details. Again, as the name suggests, this file talks about the student's postal address details, and any student who appears in NAT 85 file must also appear in the NAT 80 file. Okay, so any student that is appearing in NAT 80 will be there in NAT 85 file, and the data again comes from the student profile page in our system. So any updates here will again mean that you will go to the student profile page and make the changes. The file contains details like the address details for the student, the telephone details, the email address, and other fields. Next two files, which is NAT 90 and NAT 100, are two files which may or may not be blank depending on the data you have got in the system. But the files must be there at all times. So the zip folder must always contain NAT 90 and NAT 100, although these files can be blank. So for example, NAT 90, which is the client disability file, will only contain data if there is any disability recorded for any student who is there in NAT 80 or 85 file. If in the collection year there is no disability recorded for any student, your disability file will be basically empty, but the file itself will be present in the zip folder. Similarly, NAT 100 is the client prior educational achievement file. If you have any data recorded for client's previous educational achievements in the collection year, which is under the student profile page, NAT 100 will have data, else it will be blank. The ninth file, which is NAT 120 file, is called the training activity or enrollment details file. So this file talks about the students who have studied any units or modules in the collection year. As you can see, this contains details about the training organization. It contains details about clients, the subject, program, the unit activity dates for those units, the outcome identifier, funding sources, and other related details for the unit enrollments. NAT 120 data mostly comes from the student results page in the system. So any changes that you would like to make for NAT 120 to correct the data in it will require you to go to the student results page and edit the unit enrollment or the affected unit enrollment for the student. The last file in this zip folder is NAT 130 file, which is called the qualification completed or program completed file. As the name suggests, this file talks about any student or will contain data about any student who has successfully completed a program or a course in the collection year, which is within the duration of 1st of January 2023 till 31st of December 2023. If a student has completed a VET course, the student will appear in this NAT 130 file. This data sits under student course page in our system, and some of the details like the parchment issue date and parchment number come from the generate certificate section. So any changes here would require you to go to edit course for the student and make those changes. So these are the 10 files that your zip folder contains. Once we have these 10 files, what is the next step? So once you've got the zip folder with you, you need to go to the AVS or the NCVR portal where we actually make this upload. So you go to this website, which we have highlighted here. If you already are a registered user, you can simply put in your credentials and sign in, else you can use the link to register. Once you have done so, you will end up in this new screen, which will allow you to submit your files. Your organization name will appear in this drop down here. The type will be VET provider collection by default, which needs to stay as it is. You will need to change the year, which again is the collection year, to 2023. The period will be Jan to December. Again, we are covering the full year. So you will see the collection period dates will appear here as 1st of January till 31st of December. So once all these parameters have been selected, you can click on Add Files. So once you click on Add Files, you will see there is a new pop-up for you, and in that pop-up, you can select the NAT files that you have downloaded from the meshed platform. So you simply select that zip folder, click on Upload Files. Once you upload those files, you will see all those 10 files listed in the NCVR portal, and then you finally click on Validate. Once we click on Validate, we'll have a status report for each of your files, which we will see in a couple of minutes. You will see a status report for each of your files in the NCVR engine. If all the files are successfully validated, the next and the final step for you is to finalize submission, which means you are happy to submit the data that you have uploaded on the NCVR portal. But make sure before you click on finalize submission that all your files are free of errors or warnings. So once we upload the files, as I just mentioned, we will see the status report. So if you can see in this snapshot here, there is a status for each of the 10 files that we have, along with the number of records that each file contains. There are 3 different types of statuses that you will be able to see in the NCVR portal. The first status is validated, which is a normal font. If it says validated, it means there is no error or warning in the file. The file is successfully validated. If you see validated with a blue highlight and underline, it would mean that the file contains some warnings. So warnings are not critical to fix, but you should try and fix as much data as you can to submit to NCVR. Finally, the last status is error. If it is a red highlight error, it simply means the file contains errors and must be fixed before you resubmit the files and finalize your submission. There is also a pre-stage of validation or a preliminary stage of validation where the file format is checked. If that stage of validation does not go through, you will see the status as invalid format. So invalid format would simply mean that your file contains some illegal characters that you need to fix. Once that stage is crossed or that stage is passed, this statuses will start to show. Now let's talk about some of the common errors or warnings that you may receive in your AVETMISS data upload to NCVR. The first one is data extracted in the wrong format. So this is a very common error that we have seen with the clients, is using the incorrect parameters to get the NAT files to submit to NCVR. So as we discussed in the initial slides, when we are submitting data to NCVR, it's only non-claim data, and because it's year-end reporting, that needs to cover the whole year. So make sure you're extracting the data using the correct parameters, which are also available in this slide. Second one is record containing illegal characters. So this is something I just talked about a couple of minutes ago. If your file contains illegal or invalid characters, such as any special symbols or any special characters, you will start to see an error message which says invalid format. In this case, the preliminary validation itself will fail. So what you need to do is you need to open your NAT files either in Notepad or Notepad++, and then fix the data in the mesh system based on the records indicated in the export, in the error export by NCVR. So that would mean you need to remove any special symbols or characters that you have in your NAT files. Unit finish date year going cross year, but the unit has a valid outcome such as C or NYC. If the unit activity finish date is after the collection year, that is our collection year ends at 31st of December 2023. However, if your unit activity is finishing somewhere after that date, the unit cannot have a final outcome such as C or NYC, because the unit activity date is outside of the collection period or in the future. In this case, what you can do simply is go to the student results page and update the unit activity outcome for that student to CE or code 70. CE basically means continuing enrollment. So if the activity finish date is outside the collection period, the outcome needs to be CE. Vice versa, if the activity finish date is within the collection period and the outcome is enrolled or CE, you need to update the outcomes to a valid outcome because the unit activity finish date has passed. Number 4 is INTOF or INTOF USI and funding source nationals incorrect combination. So INTOF stands for international offshore. It is not a valid USI for client ID due to their funding source 31 on the subject identifier, and they'll give you the unit ID. So this is how it appears in NCVR. If the client is an onshore student, which means the client's funding source for the unit enrollment is 31, the client must have a valid USI. However, if the student is an offshore student, not in Australia, you can change the funding source for the unit to 32, which is international offshore, and the system will pass the USI as INTOF. So please make sure the combination that you're trying to send for USI and funding source is a valid combination. Next, we have wrong unit ID or wrong program ID. So this can appear in NAT 30 or NAT 60 file respectively. Wrong unit ID would give you an error in NAT 60 file if your unit identifier is not matching the TGA listing. As I mentioned earlier, you will see an error appear. If there is incorrect program ID, and you will receive an error in NAT 30, and in that case, you need to update the program identifier or the course ID in the system to match with TGA. Next, we have student address issues. So if the suburb and postcode combinations do not match, there will be some errors or warnings in your NAT 80 and 85 files. Please note that NCVR follows the Australia post listing for suburb and postcode combination. So any student addresses that you have recorded in the mesh system, they must follow the Australia post listing. If you have any errors in your NAT 80 or 85 file about the student address where the suburb and postcode combination is not matching or is irrelevant, you can visit the Australia post listing and then check what the correct combination is to update accordingly. Similarly, training location address issue would give you an error in your NAT 20 file if the suburb and postcode combination does not match for your training organization delivery location. In this case, similar action, you need to simply go to the Australia Post website, check for the correct combination, and update in the Manage Venue page in our system. Next one in line is incorrect funding source. For national data reporting, as we have talked about a few times now, the national data reporting is only for fee-for-service data or non-claim data. So make sure the funding source nationals that you have selected for student unit enrollments align with it. Course finish date issue. Course finish date must be within the same year if all unit activity is finished within the same year. So if the student's unit activity or unit enrollments have finished within the collection year, that is, no unit activity has a finish date after the collection period or in 2024, the course finish date also needs to be in 2023. So make sure that the course finish date does not go in the next collection period if the unit's activity finish within the collection period. Finally, we have the overseas postcode or OSPC issue. This is one of the most common warnings that a lot of providers receive. The warning would read something like this: address suburb cannot be a known Australian suburb if the postcode is OSPC. OSPC stands for overseas postcode. If the student's country of origin is not Australia and the funding source is either 31 or 32, postcodes will be reported as OSPC because the student's residential address or permanent address is not an Australian address. In this case, what you can simply do to resolve this warning is record the overseas or permanent address for such students in their profile page, in the student profile page, and this will get rid of this warning. So these are some of the most common errors or warnings that we have observed and would come as handy once you start to upload your files and fix your NAT files to finalize your submission. With this, we come to the end of the session. We hope that this session was useful in enhancing your understanding about AVETMISS data reporting. We thank you for your participation today. Any questions or any support required, please feel free to send us an email at support@meshgroup.com.au. Make sure that in that email, you are attaching the NAT files that you have used along with the export summary or the error summary report from NCVR, as we would need it to investigate the issues further. You can also check our online help user guide, as it does contain some resources about AVETMISS data reporting. Any questions that you may have, please feel free to put it in the chat with your college name and your name so that we can track back and get back to you with a response. Thank you.